Hi friends, we can talk about here the Java locks. So we can take an example here is that movie reservation system. Suppose you have a seats in movie theater, right? Let's draw the movie theater. Suppose you have few seats, and when that uh, people want to book the ticket, so actually what happened, so we will create a threads, so to allow multiple users to access book at the same time. Suppose we can say there are four threads, right? So at the back end is the thread of the accessing the resource, right? Here it is a, this is called a shared resource. So here multiple threads can access the resource at the same time, and they want to booking the ticket. So here the problem here is that when multiple threads access the same resource and trying to book the ticket for a seat, so there can be multiple threads can get a chance of booking the same seat, right? So to avoid that, so we have to use the either locking mechanism in Java or the synchronization mechanism in Java. So we will see the disadvantage of the synchronization or the locking advantage of the locking mechanism in the future. So now to as of now we can talk about the locking. So if we say to get the lock, right, on this shared resource, suppose we have t1, t2, t3 and t4 threads. Suppose before accessing this resource, so we can implement the locking mechanism, so that so every thread, if we have the lock, then only the thread is allowed to access this resource, shared resource, right? So suppose if we say first t1 thread t1 got the lock, right? So then the thread t1 is only allowed to book the seat. So here suppose t1 got the lock and it got the it booked the ticket. So suppose this one is booked, right? So since while doing the t1 accessing this resource, so the remaining three threads did not get the lock, right? So these threads will be in waiting state. Once t1 is booked the seat, and when the t is completed the task, so the t1 will do the unlock the resource. So then at that point of time, t2 can enter and get the lock. It can be any of them, t2, t2, t3 or t4. So any one of the other thread will get the lock, then it can go and book the ticket, any other seat, right? Since the first book this seat is already booked, then it will look for the thread 2 will look for the remaining availability seats, then book one of them. Then while T2 is booking the seat, the remaining two T3 and T4 threads will waiting in the queue, right? So this is the basic locking mechanism. Let's see how do we implement this one in a Java code. Suppose there is a class called reentrant lock, right? Reentrant lock. Suppose we have a variable lock equal to new reentrant lock. All right, and suppose we have a method like access the resource, like this is one method. So in this method, suppose you are accessing the resource, right? So you can use that lock method, right? Then you can uh, then you can do the code whatever you want. Once you are completed, then you can use the lock dot unlock method. So until you complete this code, the remaining threads will be in a waiting state until until the first thread t1 is calling the lock dot unlock method. The remaining threads will be in waiting state. So to avoid that in case of any exceptions is happened while doing the while accessing the resource, so there can be a chance of missing the executing this lock.unlock method, right? So it's always better to put this code in a try catch finally black. So in the finally black you have to call the unlock method. So that is the best approach, right? So that is the access. Suppose here now how do you call? So you can create a 4 threads. Thread t1 equal to new thread, right? New thread, and say, so I'm using this lambda function here so that you don't need to create extend the thread and do the implementation. So thread equal to, so here you are simply calling access resource method, right? Then you can complete this one. Then you can call the t1 dot start. So like this you can create a t2 t3 and t4, right? So here the thing is that there can be, though all the 4 threads can trying to acquire a lock, calling this method and trying to acquire a lock at the same time, but there is only one thread get a lock, whoever comes the first, right? So the remaining threads has to wait. So that is the basic locking mechanism. Now the advantage of the synchronization, the advantage of locks or the synchronization is, right? So in case of synchronization, so definitely you have to either synchronize the method or you have to synchronize the object. Here synchronize, instead of lock method you can call synchronize this object, right? So until this block is completed, then only you can, after the lock will be coming out, right? So you in case of, if you want to apply the synchronization mechanism between that, two different methods, so it's difficult to implement the synchronization. If you want to lock in one method, do synchronization in one method, and if you want to come out from the other method, then it will be difficult. So the lock keys have the feature to, you can lock anywhere and you can unlock anywhere in the flow, right? So that is the advantage of locking, right? Now we can discuss about what is reentrant lock. So in case of reentrant lock, suppose you have a, that means a lock, the thread which is having already lock, so can re-enter with the trying to get a lock again. So that is called a reentrant lock. Means if there is a thread t1 is already got a access and using the resource, and due to some conditions, right, so it can go back and try, when it is trying to lock, get the lock again, so it will get the lock again, right? So it will the same thread can try to get a lock again. So since, but the thread already have the owner of that object or getting the resource, right? So it is it's not required to get the lock again, so there won't be any exception. But it will internally, it will maintain the count, how many times that the same thread is trying to access. That's called a thread held count, right? Then so what happened, whenever how many times this lock is called, right, the same number of times you have to call the unlock method. So that is a mandatory, right? Otherwise it will keep the using the same lock, right? So so that is called a reentrant lock, right? So to use the reentrant lock, then we can talk about, right, suppose the reentrant lock, or the lock has a fairness mechanism, all right? So the fairness mechanism, suppose you have a 4 threads, right? Suppose you have a 4 threads, t1, t2 and t3 and t4, right? So suppose there are 3 seeds, so t1 is got the got the lock and trying to access the resource. Then in that case, so the remaining 3 threads are in a waiting state, right? So the fairness tells the lock mechanism lock dot lock has a true or false. So the true represent fairness, right? So means that it takes a boolean value, right? So means that it's a fairness value, right? So what happened, thread T1 while accessing the resource after unlocking, right? So if you apply the fairness, so whichever the first come first server, suppose T2 or T3 or T4, right? So here the T2 is a first one after the T1, right? So T2 will get a chance to acquire a lock, right? Otherwise what happens is that if there is no fairness you don't provide, by default it is a false. So suppose T1 T2 T3 T4 and are in waiting. Suppose before while at the time of releasing the T1 the lock, right? Suppose if the T5 thread come and readily available, so there can be a chance of directly T5 will give a get the chance to get the lock. So the T3 and T2 T3 T4 and will keep waiting, right? So to avoid that, so we can give a fairness value as a true. Okay, so there is another thing like read write lock. So in case of read write lock, so suppose here in this scenario, suppose T1 got a lock and T1 is trying to T1 is accessing the resource. So meanwhile, so T2 T3 and T4 also keep waiting, so it is not required to wait, right? So the T2 T3 and T4 can try to access the resource for read only purpose, right? So we can do that one with the read lock mechanism, right? So for that there is a class called read write some reentrant lock, right? Reentrant lock. Okay, some new object something. So here the read write reentrant lock has a lock dot read lock, okay, and lock dot write lock. Like there are two methods are there. So if you want to apply for the reading purpose, you can look for the read lock. If you want to apply for the write lock, so you can look for the write lock, right? So that is the advantage of read write lock. And one more thing, so suppose thread T1 is accessing the resource, right? So we have a like lock dot lock method. So you can specify here also the waiting time, right? So if you specify 5 comma some time unit is equal to time unit dot seconds, so this lock will there is a lock dot try lock. So in case of try lock, the try lock will have the time unit, right? So this thread will trying to get a lock, try the lock, right? So if they get a access, right, then only it will go to execute the locking mechanism, access the shared resource, and it will book the seat. So there is a one option the lock has. So you can specify the time, otherwise then within that time then it will go. If it gets a lock, it will do the work. If it is a if condition, right? It is a if condition. If you can apply the if condition, like right. Otherwise you can do some other thing, right? If it is not get the lock within 5 seconds, then it will do the other work. So the lock has this feature also, right? So these are the advantage of locks, right, over the synchronization. Thanks for watching me. Thank you.